Hi. By now you may or may not have seen my heterosexual life partner's favorite games of when he was a child. As you may know, he compiled a top 10 list. And with no offense to the man that holds up Crying Man Studios, but that punk is dead wrong. And it's time to show him why, with my favorite games of when I was a child. Here's my top 10 pick. Now, as you'll come to see in this video, our gaming histories of Steve and I were quite different. Where he walked the path of SNES, PC gaming and Nintendo 64, I found my solace in what would be its greatest rival, the PlayStation 1. Of course, I also played a lot of Game Boy games when I was a child, so expect to find a lot of those two gaming systems in this top 10.
Number 10.
Barely making the cut of the list is Ridge Racer for PlayStation 1. The story of Ridge Racer is the following. In 1993, a marvel of a racing game was made for the Namco System 22. It was a small game, with a choice of 3 maps and 4 levels. Though after progressing through the game, one could eventually drive through the same maps in reverse. This game featured 6 awesome tracks, and that is music tracks, not track tracks. You start off with 4 cars, all with their individual strengths and weaknesses, but beat the minigame in the beginning of the game, and you get another 8 cars to choose from. It also gave you the ability to drift, before Justin Lin made it cool. Well, not really cool, but you get my point. 1 year later, they brought it to the greatest gaming system this world has ever seen, giving it some of the greatest controls and responsiveness while retaining the splendid graphics. Though be warned, choosing to drive stick rather than automatically makes the whole thing bloody difficult. They also added a nifty feature that I wish I'd known when I was a child. The disc was modified to be able to be ejected from a PlayStation after being loaded, which allowed you to put in your own CD and race to the music of your liking. Just one more thing that makes me love this game and cry tears of nostalgia over a lost childhood. There is no actual story as you may have guessed, but then again, this is a racing game, so does it really need one? What it needed was a multiplayer mode. Seriously!
Number 9.
It's pizza time! Apart from perhaps the Power Rangers, it's hard for me to find a group of teen vigilantes that more define my boyhood. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2 Back from the Sewers for the original Game Boy delivered exactly the experience I wanted from a handheld Turtles game. It was action-filled, the music was a treat, and the controls were another delight. And back in a time when fancy graphics weren't the greatest concern, this gem still held its own in that department. But even with this clear view and responsive controls, this was far from an easy game. Hacking, smashing, and jump kicking your way through these long and varied stages was not something I as a child ever managed to do in one go, nor have I ever succeeded. But it never felt like an unfair challenge, and the fact that you could continue, be it without your points, from the stage from where you got a game over, made it a fun playthrough. Facing such iconic bosses like the Shredder, Krang, or even Bebop and Rocksteady, therefore, though hard, was a blast as a child. Now, it's still one of my favorite blasts from the past.
Number 8.
Making a decent Alien game has in the past proven to be tricky. But with such a cool franchise, many attempts are inevitable, and that is why we must always honor the successes. And I'm here to tell you today that there was a great Alien game before Alien Isolation. The name? Alien Trilogy for the PlayStation 1. Christ, that box alone still scares the bejeebies out of me. I have no problems admitting that picking a Doom clone would seem insulting over the original. But then again, this is the list of the greatest games I personally played as a child, and Doom is a game I have yet to lay a finger on. So all I can say is that Alien Trilogy holds a special place in my heart. It was my first-person shooter, and the one that hooked me on the concept. It was also my first scary game, attested by the fact that my father bought it for my older brother, and forbade me to play it. Sorry Dad, I couldn't resist. Armed with a bunch of classics such as the flamethrower, that awesome machine gun, as well as the usual such as the shotgun, you can navigate your way through 30 levels and fight hordes of facehuggers, chest bursters, dog aliens, the classical aliens, humans, and 3 separate queens. While the lack of a narrative and the confusing layout can have you running around in circles unsure of what to do, you never find yourself leaving the world the game has created for you. The atmosphere of the level design, especially in the first levels, complemented with a great track, keeps you at permanent unease. Perhaps Irwin Fletcher said it best: Alien Trilogy is nothing revolutionary, but it's a damn good shooter. But allow me my nostalgia goggles, and it was one hell of a revolutionary game, at least for me. And I should say it now, because in space no one can hear my scream about how great this game is, and what recognition it deserves.
Number 7.
Twisted Metal is a long-running franchise, one that I'm sorry to hear might not be continued in the future. These games are 100% carnage as you assume your role as a contestant in a free-for-all to the death. In cars! It's the second and most popular game of the series that captivated my wildest dreams when I was a child. It's the distant future, the year 2006. Well, I guess it is a bit dated. Anyway, the self-proclaimed ruler of the earth, Calypso, holds a Demolition Derby Extreme for 14 contestants. Twisted Metal. After the events of the first game, and with LA in ruins, he decides that now that the earth is his domain, it becomes his playing ground. The result? From LA to Hong Kong, from New York City to Amazonia, from Moscow to Antarctica, and even in Holland and underneath the Eiffel Tower, vehicular manslaughter to the extreme ensues. Apparently Belgium wasn't chosen as a proper battleground, but what the hell. Twisted Metal 2 is great fun with such amazing attributes as rockets, homing rockets, machine guns and special attacks per car, with each car having its own strengths and weaknesses. You can pick anything from a fast maneuverable hitter to my own favorite, Warthog, a slow but durable tank. The awesome and unlockable boss minion notwithstanding. Twisted Metal was fun to play alone and hilarious intense piece of art to play with too. Definitely a recommender if you're looking for a fast-paced and mindlessly violent fun game that doesn't take itself too seriously. And at the end of each campaign, enjoy the sweet irony that is getting what you wished for.
Number 6.
After acid-filled alien monstrosities and violent cars armed to the teeth, I hope that by naming Spyro Year of the Dragon for the PlayStation 1 as my personal number 6, you will understand that I'm not a brooding psychopath. I too played normal and fun little fantasy fairy tale games. I had a hard time choosing between this, the third title in the series, as well as the last one designed by Insomniac, or the original. Just don't get me started on Gateway to Glimmer. But in the end, I had to choose for what is, in my opinion, the all-around best Spyro the Dragon game. The original game was great and laid a lot of groundwork for the third game to grow upon, which also incorporated a few good elements in Gateway to Glimmer, mainly Moneybags and Hunter the Cheetah. In the Spyro the Dragon series, you assume the role of the titular character and do what a tough little, hard-spoken, brave little purple dragon would do: save the world, ram your horns into the behinds of enemies, collect hordes of treasure, and have a buttload of fun doing all of this. You are accompanied, as usual, by your trusty friend Sparks the Firefly, whom you, being a class act dragon, allow to take all the hits for you. This time around, an evil sorceress has stolen all the eggs from Spyro's homeworld, and it is up to him to get them back. Why is the evil sorceress doing this? Lore states that magic comes from the wings of dragons, and to keep the magic from draining from her realm, and her evil dominion along with it, she wants to keep all the dragon wings to herself. This same lore, my fellow Game of Thrones fans, is why magic returns full force to Westeros with the birth of 3 dragons. Along the way, he meets many cool characters such as Sheila the Kangaroo, Sergeant Bird, a penguin with guns on his shoulders like a frickin' Blastoise, Bentley, the gentle mountain giant with a club that can pile screw you into the ground, and Agent 9, an amusing and intelligent monkey with a futuristic gun. The best part is that you can actually play as these fun and delightful characters. Keeping in mind that this is a kids game, Year of the Dragon responds well enough, looks bright and colorful enough, and has enough child-targeted humor to keep it fun and lighthearted all the way through the playthrough. Hell, even the voice acting is great. The added playable characters and multitude of minigames such as skateboarding and the likes also makes this more than worthwhile. One of PlayStation 1's all-time classics in my opinion.
Number 5.
Getting to the top of the top now with Crash Bandicoot 2 Cortex Strikes Back as our first in the final 5. Who doesn't know this 1997 Naughty Dog PlayStation 1 classic? The Crash Bandicoot franchise has spawned many a game from the traditional platformers to racing games and free-for-all brawlers. My own personal sentiment is that it should have died along with PlayStation 1, as newer titles such as Twinsanity or Crash of the Titans make me spin until I vomit. But hey, that's just me. In all seriousness, it's the 3 first games, Crash Bandicoot, Cortex Strikes Back, and Warped, that I find most enjoyable. Crash Team Racing is more than fun in its own right, but the traditional games had the best formula, namely, make your way through long levels, smashing enemies and boxes alike with your trusty sidekick and mentor, Aku Aku. All 3 games are thrill rides, from Indiana-like running away from rolling boulders, to riding warthogs and polar bears, and flying around in space in jetpacks. In short, the early Crash Bandicoot games encompass all the fantasy and fun a small 90s child would have wanted. But my personal reasons for choosing Wrath of Cortex must be this. Not only did I not have the 3rd game in the series, but the 2nd simply had the best balance between dull and nutty. Between fighting robots and mutant animals, all Crash Bandicoot titles sport a decent and enjoyable amount of insanity. But where the first game could have used options such as slides, special jumps and jetpacks, the 3rd game went a little overboard in my opinion with the introduction of a bazooka and these racing levels. Wrath of Cortex also had a tremendous advantage over its predecessor in that it wasn't way too hard for the little boy in the last few levels, which meant that the euphoria when I finally defeated Crash Bandicoot game without using cheat codes was all the greater.
Number 4.
Is there anyone who had a PS1 when it was all the hype and can't put this title in his or her favorite list? The original badassery that is Tomb Raider. God, she's so fucking epic. No wonder I wanted to marry her back when I was a young lad. Laura is the puzzle-solving, gunslinging, and tomb-raiding queen of the hive that is PlayStation 1. It's hard to think of a more iconic character from that gaming system. With 18 games in its franchise since its debut in 1996, you can bet at least the original was one heck of a game. Joining Laura in her quest to find the Scion, or whatever it's called, of Atlanta was exactly the right mixture between a fantastical adventure and difficult puzzles. From Peru to Rome and the pyramids in Egypt, you fight and solve your way through crypts and tombs filled with dangerous animals, dinosaurs, the undead, death traps, and levers. Lots and lots of levers. All to arrive at the mystical Atlantis in which you must brutally murder a newborn. The PlayStation 1's controls for this game were admittedly a bit hard to actually control, but the sheer atmosphere of the game made up for that in abundance. You actually felt like you were there in a long-forgotten hall searching for lost treasure, a feeling, by the way, that was well mimicked in the remake Tomb Raider Anniversary. The original Tomb Raider demanded everything, every bit of skill and effort a child could muster, but in return it gave one hell of a gaming experience. And face it, you were more than willing to give Lara Croft everything you had.
Number 3.
Metal Gear Solid for PlayStation 1 may not have been the first in its franchise, but it was the first I, and I believe a lot of my age mates, got to know. It follows the mission of the retired yet called back into combat Agent Solid Snake. He must stop his former unit, Foxhound, and all its crazy skilled fighters to stop a giant walking robot and prevent nuclear war. Metal Gear is an amazing story that draws you in, even if you're a kid and you don't understand exactly what it means. There is humor, depth, and tension in there, all flowing so well together, from stealth to action, with creative bosses such as Revolver Ocelot, Psycho Mantis. Heck, the animation, visual imagery, voice acting, and music, they all set an admirable tone, too beautiful to explain in words. The fact that I never finished this game back when I was little does nothing to diminish any of this. Whether it's by breaking the fourth wall, dramatic dialogue, and heartbreaking moments, plot twists, or tense battles, Metal Gear manages to captivate you from start to finish. And let's be honest, Watching Snake run around in that box was just a cool concept, and we still laugh about it to this day. Without a doubt, I'd classify this as the coolest game in this top 10, and it has ensured me to be a fan of all the titles that had to come afterward. Well, almost all.
Number 2.
The silver medal must go to one of the most popular games back in the day. If you own this game and don't put it in your own personal top 10, then you are either forgetful, a liar, or a communist that's too afraid of mentioning this game lest he be exposed as one. I talk of course of Tetris for the original Game Boy. From a game designed in 1984, you can't expect all that much complexity, but Tetris shows that a simplistic game can stand the decay of time well enough. Simple in its concept and unbelievably addictive, the 1989 Game Boy version of this game has remained the best one out there, by far beating out any of the clones. Is it the music that makes it so endearing? Is it the distorted crying sheep when you agonizingly reach the top and get a game over? Or is it the fact that the blocks aren't colored and thus much more appeasing to the eyes? In all honesty, I don't know. All I do know is that I'm eternally grateful for Alexei Pajitnov for creating a game that made long trips in the car bearable. I think this may be the only game I ever played non-stop from the north of Belgium to the south of France when we went on holiday. So thank you, Alexei. Thank you so much for keeping me and my chaotic, hyperactive growing brain docile for hours straight.
Number 1.
Pokemon Blue. Ah, sue me, I like Pokemon, and I loved it when I was a child. Days that I had that blue cartridge in my blue Game Boy Color were the shit, and you can't tell me otherwise. Pokemon Red was equally good, of course, but that was a copy owned by my sister. I had the Blastoise variant. Needless to say that, perhaps due to that, my favorite starter of all time is Squirtle. It was a close call between the first and second gen games for me. To be honest, I think I've probably played more on Pokemon Gold than I have on Pokemon Blue. Having 16 badges, specialized Pokeballs, holdable items, more color, the possibility to breed Pokemon, introducing berries and the possibility to fight again against certain trainers, having a night and day system and timed events, getting calls when your box was about to fill up, as well as having the entire Kanto region involved in a new game, were all pretty good reasons to coin Gold and Silver as the better games. And who knows, perhaps, in all honesty, they were. But as this list is run by the most fun I had playing the game when I was a child, I have to go with the first generation. I didn't understand the English language at the time, and I had no idea that moves like Leer and Tail Whip actually did something important. I trained my starter, and only my starter, so I had a level 40-something Blastoise against Lieutenant Surge and still won. I had no idea what I was doing, and I loved every minute of it. I loved getting lost in Mount Moon. I loved making my way through the rock tunnel without using Flash because I didn't know where to find it. I loved receiving my first ever badge and my first ever Pokemon. I loved creaming Gary, no homo, that smug bastard. I loved discussing with other kids at school tips and hints to get further in this game. I adored finally making it to the Elite Four and destroying my rival once and for all, becoming a Pokemon Master for the first time. I know it's cliché to have this be your number one, but in all honesty, I cannot think of a video game experience that I enjoyed more as a child. Nor one that has stuck with me for so long and affected me so much. It truly deserves the number one spot and will remain there forevermore. And there you have it. Those were my top 10 games I played when I was a child. Agree or disagree? Let me know in the comment section below. And like this video, especially if you liked it more than Steve has. Till next time, ciao! Look man, you're getting old. I am getting old. Obvious is getting old. But that's okay, because we still have each other. And just like this game has passed the decay of time well, and just like I'm still here to play for you, you are still here to play with me. There is no shame in honoring the past and remembering from where the future began. We won't forget each other, and that's all that matters.
Oh, Nessie.